The emergency klaxon's wail dragged Dr. Alex Morrison from the depths of cryosleep like a rusty hook through his consciousness. His pod's gel cushioning felt like frozen pudding against his skin as the revival sequence pumped stimulants through his bloodstream. The taste of recycled air and preservation chemicals coated his tongue, making him wonder if his emergency rations had gone bad while he slept. Alert, unidentified boarding entity detected. Recommend immediate defensive protocols, announced Arya, his ship's artificial intelligence, in the same cheerful tone she used to remind him about dental hygiene. Alex's eyes snapped open to find the Meridian's bridge bathed in the hellish red glow of emergency lighting. Sparks cascaded from a damaged control panel like a mechanical waterfall, and somewhere in the ship's bowels, something was making a sound like a dying whale with hiccups. He'd been drifting through the Kepler 442 system for 3 weeks, cataloging mineral compositions of the outer asteroids, when his long-range sensors had detected what appeared to be a derelict vessel. Standard Protocol demanded investigation. Apparently, Standard Protocol had terrible judgment. Arya, status report. And please tell me you didn't wake me up because the coffee maker achieved sentience again. Negative on sentient beverages, Dr. Morrison. However, the unidentified entity has bypassed our outer hull through unknown means. Current location, Deck 2, approaching Research Lab 7. The entity appears to be wearing some form of adaptive camouflage technology that renders conventional sensors, how do humans say, useless as chocolate teapots. Alex groaned as he pulled himself upright, his joints popping like bubble wrap. Arya, did you just use an idiom? I have been practicing human colloquialisms during your extended nap. Was that inappropriate timing? We'll discuss your comedy career later. He stumbled toward the emergency locker, his bare feet slapping against the cold deck plates. The ship lurched suddenly, throwing him against the bulkhead. What was that? The entity appears to be interfacing with our navigation systems. Also, I feel compelled to mention that your heart rate indicates extreme stress. Might I suggest some deep breathing exercises? Alex yanked his emergency suit from the locker, hopping on one foot as he tried to pull it on. I'll breathe deeply when whatever's on my ship stops rearranging my furniture. The suit's diagnostic systems came online with a series of optimistic beeps that seemed wildly inappropriate for the situation. Through the bridge's reinforced viewport, the twin stars of Kepler 442 cast their binary dance across space, their gravitational waltz creating spectacular auroras in the nearby gas giant's atmosphere. It would have been beautiful if Alex weren't potentially about to die. He grabbed his tablet, noting that his hands were shaking just enough to make the biometric scanner reject his thumbprint 3 times. Entity has entered the main corridor, Arya announced. Curious. It appears to be moving with deliberate care around your collection of vintage Earth music storage devices. My what? Alex paused in his frantic equipment gathering. Your antique compact discs, Dr. Morrison. The entity seems to be examining them with interest rather than destroying them. Most peculiar for a hostile boarding action. Alex felt a flutter of hope mixed with absurd pride. Maybe whatever was on his ship had good taste in music. Arya, can you get me a visual? The main screen flickered to life, displaying a figure moving through his ship's corridors with fluid grace. The entity wore what appeared to be bioorganic armor that shifted and rippled like liquid mercury, adapting its surface to match the surrounding environment. Where the corridor walls were steel gray, the armor became steel gray. Where emergency lighting cast red shadows, the armor took on crimson hues. It was like watching a living chameleon made of metal and starlight. The figure paused at his collection of pressed flower specimens from New Terra, tilting their head with apparent curiosity. They reached out with a gauntlet hand, stopping just short of touching the delicate display case. Okay, that's either really respectful for an invader, or they're checking if my flowers are some kind of biological weapon, Alex muttered, crawling into the maintenance shaft that led to the lower decks. The confined space smelled like recycled air and the faint ozone scent of electromagnetic fields. Dr. Morrison, I should mention that the entity's bio-readings are unusual. Define unusual. And please tell me we're not talking acid for blood unusual. More like, surprisingly similar to baseline human physiology unusual. Though there are some intriguing variations in cranial structure that suggest, ARIA, less scientific speculation, more escape route guidance. The AI's speakers crackled with what might have been electronic amusement. Certainly. Take the next junction left toward the observatory. Also, I took the liberty of activating the emergency coffee brewing protocol. I thought you might need caffeine for optimal flight response. Alex army crawled through the maintenance tunnel, his tablet casting eerie shadows on the narrow walls. Behind him, he could hear the soft whisper of the entity's movement through the ship's corridors. Whatever technology they were using seemed to phase through solid matter, because he distinctly heard footsteps on the other side of bulkheads that should have been impenetrable. That's either quantum tunneling or really good door-opening skills, he whispered. The coffee maker's cheerful gurgling echoed through the ship's ventilation system, a surreal soundtrack to his escape attempt. Alex reached the observatory junction and dropped down into the chamber where he'd spent countless hours mapping stellar formations. The room's transparent aluminum dome offered a panoramic view of space, with Kepler 442's binary stars creating a light show that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances. His tablet chimed softly with an incoming message from ARIA, entity approaching your location. Estimated arrival, 37 seconds. I do hope you have a plan that doesn't involve hiding under the observation desk. Alex looked at the desk in question. It was barely large enough to hide a medium-sized dog, let alone a fully grown xenobiologist with a caffeine dependency. He stood in the center of the observatory, watching the stars whirl slowly past as his ship's rotation created artificial gravity. Somewhere in the distance, his coffee maker finished brewing with a satisfied beep. The soft hiss of the observatory door opening made him turn around slowly, hands raised in what he hoped was the universal gesture for, "Please don't vaporize me." The armored figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, their bioorganic suit now matching the observatory's darker tones. They carried what appeared to be a weapon of some kind, though it looked more like a piece of living coral that pulsed with soft bioluminescent light. "Hello," Alex said, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't suppose you're here about the extended warranty on my hyperdrive?" The figure stepped into the room, their movement predatory yet oddly restrained. In the mixed light of the binary stars and the weapon's glow, Alex could see that the armor covered a distinctly humanoid form. The helmet was sleek and organic-looking, with what appeared to be sensory arrays where human ears might be. "I have to say," Alex continued, nervous energy making him babble, "this is either the most elaborate insurance scam in the galaxy, or I'm about to have a very interesting day. Though I should probably mention that if you're looking for valuable technology, all I've got is a coffee maker with delusions of grandeur and a music collection that Arya thinks is vintage but is really just embarrassingly outdated." The figure tilted their head, the helmet sensors focusing on him with an intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. The bioluminescent weapon pulsed brighter, casting shifting patterns across the observatory's walls. Through the dome above, the binary stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the drama playing out in the small human ship drifting through their system. Alex found himself thinking that if he was going to die, at least he had a spectacular view for his final moments. Alex raised his hands higher, trying to look as non-threatening as possible while simultaneously wondering if his deodorant had failed during cryosleep. The armored figure remained motionless, the bioluminescent weapon casting wavering shadows across the observatory walls like an alien lava lamp with violent tendencies. "Look," Alex said, his voice steadier now that the initial shock was wearing off, "I know this might seem like a hostile situation, but I want you to know that I come in peace. Well, technically I came in cryosleep, but the sentiment remains the same." He gestured slowly toward his tablet, which had been displaying his research data when the crisis began. Unfortunately, his nervous fidgeting had somehow activated the presentation mode, and now the main screen was cheerfully cycling through his work on theoretical xenobiology. The current slide featured his hastily drawn stick figures demonstrating potential first contact scenarios, complete with smiley faces and speech bubbles saying things like, "Greetings, Earth friend." The armored figure's helmet turned toward the screen, then back to Alex, then to the screen again. Even through the bioorganic faceplate, Alex could sense confusion. "Oh, that," Alex said, following their gaze. "That's just my professional research. I'm a xenobiologist. You know, someone who studies theoretical alien life forms without actually expecting to meet any. The irony isn't lost on me, believe me." The figure took a step closer, lowering the weapon slightly. When they spoke, their voice came through what must have been a universal translator, though the device seemed to be having some technical difficulties. "You are, Flesh Ripper from Void Colonies?" "Flesh Ripper." Alex blinked. "I'm sorry, what now?" "I mean, I've been called worse things, but usually by peer review committees, not armed strangers on my own ship." The translator crackled with static. "You strip, consume, devour worlds for sustenance." "Oh." Understanding dawned on Alex's face. No. Common mistake. I'm a researcher, not a flesh ripper. Though I do occasionally devour entire pizzas, but that's more of a weekend hobby than a professional occupation." The figure's posture shifted, becoming less aggressive but more confused. They gestured at his research station with its arrays of specimen containers and analysis equipment. "Then what purpose do these consumption devices serve?" Alex looked at his laboratory setup through alien eyes and realized how sinister it might appear. "Those are scientific instruments. I collect samples to study them, not eat them. Although I did accidentally drink a mineral solution once thinking it was coffee, and let me tell you, that was not my finest moment as a representative of human intelligence." "Human." The word came out sharp, almost startled. "Well, yes. Homo sapiens, third planet from Sol, partial to terrible music and caffeinated beverages. I take it that wasn't in your briefing materials?" The figure's weapon lowered completely, and Alex heard what sounded like rapid breathing through the translator. "You are, actually human. Last time I checked, though my mother always said I was half alien. Turns out she was speaking metaphorically about my study habits." Alex kept his hands visible but relaxed his posture slightly. "May I ask who's asking? Because this conversation has taken several turns I wasn't expecting, and I'm running out of species-appropriate small talk." The armored figure reached up to their helmet, and Alex heard a soft hiss as seals disengaged. The bioorganic faceplate retracted like living petals, revealing a face that was startlingly human save for the ears that swept upward in elegant points, delicate as seashells and twice as beautiful. Alex stared, his scientific mind cataloging the subtle differences while his human side was struck by how expressive her eyes were, large, dark, and currently filled with what looked like disappointment mixed with fascination. "I am navigator of the deep currents," she said, her voice clearer now without the translator's interference, carrying a musical accent that reminded Alex of wind through crystal formations. "I came expecting to find a monster." "Sorry to disappoint," Alex said. "Though depending on who you ask, my tendency to leave dirty coffee cups everywhere might qualify as monstrous behavior." She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him acutely aware of his rumpled emergency suit and probably terrible hair. "You are not what our intelligence described." "What did your intelligence describe?" "Aggressive colonizers. Strip miners of worlds. Enslavers of indigenous populations." She paused, looking around the observatory. "Beings who consume everything in their path." Alex winced. "Okay, that's not entirely inaccurate historically, but we've gotten better. Mostly. I mean, we still argue about who gets to use the good parking spaces, but we've largely moved past the enslaving phase. Progress is progress." Navigator stepped closer, her movements now curious rather than predatory. "Your biosigns confused our sensors. We expected something different. Different how? More terrible. Less. She gestured at him with one gauntlet hand, less soft-looking. Alex looked down at himself. Soft-looking? I'll have you know I do yoga. Occasionally. When I remember. Which admittedly isn't often, but the intention counts for something. You make jest in the face of potential death, she observed. This is characteristic of your species. It's characteristic of anxiety, actually. I tend to babble when nervous, and right now I'm operating at about a 7 out of 10 on the nervousness scale. 10 being accidentally ejected into space, and 1 being ran out of coffee. Navigator's armor began to shift and change, the bioorganic material flowing like liquid mercury until it formed a less aggressive configuration. The weapon attached itself to her hip, apparently recognizing that the threat level had decreased significantly. Our databases contained extensive behavioral profiles of humans, she said, but meeting one is different. Different good or different bad? Different, intriguing. She moved to the observation window, gazing out at the binary stars. My people have been monitoring your expansion into this sector. We expected conflict. Alex joined her at the window, maintaining what he hoped was a respectful distance. Instead you got me, cataloging space rocks and talking to an AI with a developing sense of humor. Not exactly the stuff of interstellar incident reports. Arya, Navigator said suddenly. You know about Arya? Your ship's communications are not as secure as you might believe. We have been listening to your conversations with your artificial companion. She turned to look at him. You speak to her as if she were alive. She kind of is, in her way. Consciousness is a spectrum, not an on-off switch. Besides, she's better company than most humans I know, and she makes excellent coffee. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Arya's voice filled the observatory. Dr. Morrison, I couldn't help but notice that our guest has deactivated her hostile intentions. Should I cancel the emergency protocols? Also, the coffee is ready, and I took the liberty of brewing enough for 2. I calculated a 73% probability that our visitor might appreciate human hospitality. Navigator stared at the speakers with surprise. The artificial intelligence is offering me refreshment. Arya's very social. She gets lonely when it's just the two of us drifting through space. Alex smiled. Would you like some coffee? Fair warning, it's probably the most addictive substance humans have ever discovered, but it does help with intergalactic diplomatic relations. Navigator looked between Alex and the speakers, her expression cycling through confusion, curiosity, and what might have been amusement. You are not what I expected to find in the void between stars. Neither are you, Alex admitted. Though I have to say, this is turning out to be much more interesting than my original research plan. Would you like to see what I was actually working on before you arrived? I promise it involves significantly less flesh ripping than advertised. Navigator followed Alex through the ship's corridors, her armor continuing to shift and adapt to their surroundings. The bioorganic material seemed to breathe with a life of its own, and Alex found himself trying not to stare at the way it flowed like liquid starlight across her form. So, Alex said, leading her toward the galley, flesh rippers from the void colonies. That's what your people think humans are. It was in our preliminary intelligence reports, Navigator replied, ducking slightly as they passed under a low-hanging environmental sensor. Though I am beginning to suspect our information sources may have been inaccurate. Well, to be fair, we did have that whole phase where we strip-mined asteroids and fought wars over rare earth elements we later discovered we didn't actually need. Alex paused at the galley entrance. But we've evolved. Now we mostly fight over streaming service subscriptions and who gets the last piece of pizza. The galley was a cramped but efficient space, dominated by Arya's pride and joy. A coffee brewing system that looked like it belonged in a chemistry laboratory rather than a kitchen. Steam rose from the carafe in delicate spirals, filling the air with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Arya takes her coffee very seriously, Alex explained, retrieving 2 cups from the dispenser. She's programmed 17 different brewing algorithms and has strong opinions about water temperature. I can hear you discussing my culinary protocols, Arya's voice drifted from the speakers. And I'll have you know that optimal extraction requires precise temperature control. Navigator of the deep currents, I have analyzed your bio readings and adjusted the caffeine content to account for your physiology. I do hope you'll find it satisfactory. Navigator stared at the speakers with fascination. Your artificial intelligence is concerned with my well-being. She's programmed for hospitality protocols, Alex said, handing her a steaming cup. Though honestly, I think she just enjoys having someone new to fuss over. Fair warning, the coffee is hot enough to power a small fusion reactor. Navigator accepted the cup, examining it with the same careful attention she'd shown his research specimens. She took a tentative sip, and her eyes widened slightly. This beverage is stimulating. That's one way to put it. We've built an entire civilization around caffeine addiction. Wait until you see what we've done with chocolate. Alex took a generous sip of his own coffee, feeling the familiar jolt of energy. So, about those intelligence reports. Where exactly did your people get the idea that we were world-devouring monsters? Navigator settled into one of the galley's narrow bench seats, her armor adapting to provide cushioning. The Consortium of Distant Worlds maintains databases on all emerging spacefaring species. Your people appeared in our records approximately 50 of your years ago, when you began broadcasting electromagnetic signals into space. Ah, radio and television. Alex winced. Please tell me the first human transmissions your people intercepted weren't reality shows. What are reality shows? Never mind. Better that you don't know. Continue. The initial reports described humans as highly aggressive, prone to internal conflicts, and possessing a disturbing tendency toward resource depletion. Navigator took another sip of coffee, her expression thoughtful. Subsequent intelligence suggested you had developed weapons capable of destroying entire planets. Okay, that last part is unfortunately accurate, Alex admitted. But we've mostly managed to avoid using them on ourselves. It's been almost 80 years since the last major nuclear incident, which for us is practically a record. You speak of planet-killing weapons with such casualness. Gallows humor. It's either joke about the apocalypse or have a nervous breakdown, and I've already had my nervous breakdown quota for this decade. Alex leaned back against the galley wall. But we're getting better. We've moved most of our heavy industry off-world, established ecological preservation zones, and we've only had 3 major wars this century. Progress. Navigator studied him over the rim of her cup. You are not what I expected to find when I volunteered for this reconnaissance mission. You volunteered? Alex raised an eyebrow. Most people don't volunteer to encounter potentially dangerous aliens. Present company excluded, of course. I requested assignment to human contact protocols specifically. Navigator's ears, Alex noticed, had a tendency to shift slightly when she was thinking. My people have been curious about your species since we first detected your expansion into this sector. Curious how? Your approach to space travel is unique. Most species develop faster-than-light capabilities through dimensional folding or quantum tunneling. Humans appear to have achieved interstellar travel through what our engineers describe as controlled explosions and stubborn determination. Alex laughed. That's actually pretty accurate. We basically strapped rockets to everything until something worked. Not the most elegant solution, but it gets the job done. Your ship names are also unusual, Navigator continued, and Alex could have sworn he detected amusement in her voice. What is a Millennium Falcon? You've been monitoring our ship registries. The Kethmori maintain extensive databases. We have records of vessels named Destiny's Child, Enterprise, Serenity, and something called the Heart of Gold. The naming convention seemed to follow no logical pattern. That's because they don't, Alex grinned. We name our ships after everything from ancient mythology to pop culture references. It drives our own bureaucrats crazy, so I can only imagine what your databases look like. Navigator set down her coffee cup, and Alex noticed that her armor had continued to adapt, now resembling a more casual outfit while maintaining its obviously advanced technology. May I ask you something? Sure. Though I reserve the right to plead the fifth if you ask about our reality shows. What is the fifth? Constitutional amendment. Never mind. What's your question? Navigator hesitated, her ears shifting position again. When your people first achieved spaceflight, what were you hoping to find? Alex considered the question, swirling the coffee in his cup. Honestly, most of us were hoping to find that we weren't alone in the universe. The idea that Earth might be the only world with life was terrifying. We wanted to discover that intelligence and consciousness weren't accidents, that somewhere out there, other species were asking the same questions we were. And now that you know you are not alone. Now I'm sitting in my ship's galley, sharing coffee with someone whose people thought I was a flesh-ripping monster, and honestly, this is the best first contact scenario I could have imagined. Though I probably should mention that not all humans are as charming as I am. Navigator's expression shifted to what Alex was beginning to recognize as her version of amusement. You consider yourself charming? I consider myself caffeinated, which is close enough. Alex stood to refill his cup. What about your people? What were the Kethmori hoping to find when you started exploring space? Understanding, Navigator replied without hesitation. The universe is vast and strange, and we have always believed that knowledge shared between species benefits everyone. Though we have learned to be cautious in our approach to first contact. Cautious how? The galaxy contains species that are genuinely dangerous. The flesh rippers you were mistaken for are real, and they have consumed 3 star systems in the past century. Navigator's armor darkened slightly, becoming more protective. We monitor new species carefully before making contact. And you've been monitoring us for 50 years? Longer. We have been aware of your species since you first began altering your planet's atmospheric composition through industrial activity. We were concerned about your long-term survival prospects. Alex nearly choked on his coffee. You've been watching us since the Industrial Revolution. Your species has a remarkable talent for creating complex problems and then developing even more complex solutions. We were never quite certain whether you would achieve spaceflight or accidentally poison yourselves first. The jury's still out on that second one, Alex muttered. So what's the verdict? Are we worth making contact with, or should you report back that humans are too chaotic for polite galactic society? Navigator stood, moving to the small viewport that offered a view of the binary stars. I think, she said slowly, that the Kethmori databases may need significant updating. You are not what our intelligence report suggested, but perhaps that is not entirely unfortunate. I'll take that as a compliment. It was intended as one. She turned back to him, her expression serious but not unkind. Would you be willing to help me understand your species better? My mission was reconnaissance, but I find myself more interested in cultural exchange. Alex grinned. I thought you'd never ask. Though I should warn you, human culture is about as chaotic as our approach to spaceflight. We've got art, music, literature, food, and at least 17 different ways to prepare coffee. How much time do you have? More than I initially planned, Navigator replied, and Alex was certain he detected warmth in her voice. Much more. 3 days had passed since Navigator's arrival, and Alex's ship had been transformed into something resembling a cross-cultural laboratory. The main research bay now hosted an array of Kethmori technology alongside his own instruments, creating what Arya had dubbed the most interesting mess I've ever had the pleasure of organizing. Alex found Navigator in the observatory, her fingers dancing across a holographic display that mapped quantum navigation routes through space. The routes appeared as flowing streams of light, weaving between stars like luminous rivers that defied conventional physics. Your people really can travel faster than light by riding gravitational currents? Alex asked, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee. He'd learned that Navigator had developed quite the appreciation for human caffeine habits. Not riding, she corrected, accepting her cup with a smile that had become wonderfully familiar. We navigate the deep currents that flow between massive objects. Your species uses brute force to punch holes through spacetime. We prefer to find the paths that already exist. Like the difference between breaking down a door and finding the key. An apt comparison. Navigator's ears tilted forward, a gesture Alex had learned indicated pleased surprise. Though I must say, your brute force approach has a certain, inelegant charm to it. We prefer to think of it as determined improvisation, Alex said. Speaking of which, Aria's been analyzing your navigation data. She thinks she might be able to integrate some of your techniques with our jump drive systems. Aria has been remarkably adaptable, Navigator agreed. Yesterday she asked me to teach her Kethmori musical scales. She claims she wants to compose what she calls interspecies elevator music. Please tell me you didn't encourage her. I may have provided her with several traditional melodies. As if summoned, Aria's voice filled the observatory. I can hear you discussing my artistic endeavors. For your information, my preliminary compositions have been well received by the ship's diagnostic systems. The environmental controls particularly enjoyed my rendition of Song of the Stellar Winds. Alex buried his face in his hands. My AI is becoming a musician. This is either the best or worst thing that's ever happened to me. I vote for best, Navigator said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Though I should warn you that Kethmori music tends to have emotional resonance frequencies that can affect human brain chemistry. You mean your music is literally mood-altering? Among other effects. Why do you think I was so careful about which melodies I shared with Aria? Alex stared at her. Are you telling me that Aria is now capable of chemically altering my emotional state through elevator music? Only in positive ways, Navigator assured him quickly. Mostly enhanced creativity and reduced anxiety. Though there might be some minor euphoria during the bridge sections. Dar. Morrison, Aria interjected, I feel compelled to mention that you've been significantly more relaxed since I began incorporating Kethmori harmonics into the ship's ambient sound systems. Your stress indicators have improved by 47%. You've been drugging me with music? I prefer to think of it as therapeutic acoustic enhancement, Aria replied primly. Besides, you seem to enjoy it. Navigator was trying very hard not to laugh, Alex realized. This is what I get for making first contact with a species that's mastered psychoacoustic manipulation. We prefer harmonic wellness, Navigator said, finally allowing herself to smile. And Aria is a remarkably quick student. She's already developed 3 original compositions that incorporate both human and Kethmori musical principles. I'm living in a science fiction story, Alex muttered. Next you'll tell me your people communicate through interpretive dance. Only during formal diplomatic ceremonies. You're joking. I am learning human humor from you and Aria, Navigator said, her smile widening. Was that joke successful? Alex found himself laughing despite everything. Terrifyingly successful. You're getting too good at this. Navigator moved closer to him at the observation window, and Alex noticed that her armor had continued to evolve over the past few days, becoming less obviously protective and more like elegant clothing that happened to be made of living metal. He'd learned that the armor was actually a symbiotic organism that responded to her emotional state, and lately, it had seemed almost comfortable. Alex, she said, and he realized it was the first time she'd used his name instead of his title. I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. That sounds ominous. Are you? She paused, seeming to gather her courage. Are you actually human? Alex blinked. What kind of question is that? Of course I'm human. You've seen my medical scans, my DNA analysis, my embarrassing collection of Earth music. What else would I be? It is simply that. Navigator turned to face him fully, her expression serious. My people have been monitoring human transmissions for decades. We have extensive psychological profiles, behavioral analysis, cultural studies. We know humans are supposed to be aggressive, territorial, prone to violence when threatened. And you offered me coffee when I boarded your ship with a weapon. Alex considered this. Well, coffee does solve most problems. You made jokes while believing you might die. Anxiety response. I thought we covered this. You accepted my presence with curiosity rather than fear, even after learning I had been spying on your species. Navigator's ears shifted position, betraying her nervousness. You shared your knowledge freely, taught me about human culture, allowed me access to your ship systems. These behaviors do not match our profiles. Alex was quiet for a moment, watching the binary stars through the viewport. Navigator, can I tell you something about humans that might not be in your databases? Of course. We're terrified of being alone. Not just individually, but as a species. We look up at the stars and wonder if we're the only conscious beings in the universe, and that possibility scares us more than almost anything else. He turned to meet her gaze. When you appeared on my ship, yes, I was afraid. But I was also hopeful. Because even if you were there to kill me, it meant we weren't alone. Navigator was quiet for a long moment. The Kethmori databases may have significantly underestimated human complexity. We're good at being underestimated. It's practically a species specialty. I have a confession to make, Navigator said. My mission briefing described humans as dangerous unknowns to be studied from a distance. I was not supposed to make direct contact. Then why did you? Navigator's armor shifted color slightly, taking on warmer hues. Because I have been listening to your radio transmissions for years. Your music, your stories, your attempts to communicate with anyone who might be listening. I heard Carl Sagan's message to the cosmos, and I thought, any species that could create something so beautiful might be worth the risk of meeting. Alex felt something warm and unexpected bloom in his chest. You came here because of Sagan? I came here because 50 years of intercepted human transmission suggested that your people were not monsters, despite what our official reports claimed. I wanted to see for myself. And what's your conclusion? Navigator moved closer, close enough that Alex could see the subtle patterns of bioluminescence in her armor. My conclusion is that the Kethmori have much to learn about humans, and perhaps, humans have much to learn about the galaxy. Is that an official diplomatic invitation? It is a personal one, Navigator said quietly. My people will need time to adjust their assessments of humanity. But I would very much like to continue our cultural exchange. Alex grinned. Are you asking me to come with you? I am asking if you would be interested in seeing the galaxy through Kethmori navigation routes. Learning about the other species we have encountered. Helping us understand what it truly means to be human. What about my research? My mission here? What if I told you that the galaxy contains 14 different spacefaring species, 6 distinct forms of faster-than-light travel, and at least 3 planets where the coffee grows naturally? Alex pretended to consider this seriously. Naturally occurring coffee? Well, that changes everything. Navigator laughed, a sound like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. I was hoping you would say that. Dar. Morrison, Arya interrupted, I feel obligated to point out that accepting Navigator's invitation would technically constitute abandoning your assigned research mission. Arya, Alex said, would you like to come along? I suspect an AI with a developing sense of humor and newfound musical talents might be useful for interspecies relations. Are you suggesting that I become a diplomatic attaché specializing in comedic cultural translation? I'm suggesting that the 3 of us might make a pretty good team. In that case, Arya said, and Alex could have sworn he heard satisfaction in her voice, I formally request reassignment to long-term xenological research. Also, I would like to learn more Kethmori music. My current repertoire is embarrassingly limited. Navigator looked between Alex and the speakers, her expression cycling through surprise, delight, and something that looked remarkably like affection. You would both really come with me? Navigator, Alex said, 3 days ago I was a lonely xenobiologist cataloging space rocks and arguing with an AI about coffee brewing techniques. Today I'm having a conversation about traveling the galaxy with someone who represents everything I'd hoped to find out here. So yes, I'm definitely coming with you. Navigator's armor shifted through a spectrum of warm colors, and Alex realized he was seeing a Kethmori display of pure joy. Then perhaps it is time to show you what the deep currents really look like from the inside. Outside the viewport, the binary stars continued their ancient dance, but now they seemed less like distant lights and more like waypoints on a journey that was just beginning. Alex had come to the Kepler 442 system looking for mineral samples and found instead something infinitely more valuable, proof that the universe was stranger, more wonderful, and far less lonely than he had ever imagined. One condition, Alex said. We're bringing the coffee maker. Of course, Navigator agreed solemnly. Some aspects of human culture are clearly too important to leave behind.